Our dear Father in heaven, we thank you again for the day that we've been able to share together, remembering your Son, and also for the fellowship that we've shared together. And tonight we thank you for your word. We know that your prophecies contain information about what's going to happen in the future of our world. And we are thankful that you've given us this insight. And we pray tonight you might give us attentive minds to listen to our brother Caleb and take in that information that is so necessary for us. Through your Son, Jesus Christ, we ask this prayer. Amen. Okay, well, tonight we're going to be looking at the beginning of the unravelling of the scroll of Revelation. And Caleb's going to do the next two sessions on Revelation chapter 6. And he's asked as an introduction tonight that we read together the first 8 verses of Revelation chapter 6, which contain the first 4 seals of that scroll. And I will read that to you as an introduction, and then I'll get Brother Caleb to come straight up and give to us his presentation for this evening. Revelation chapter 6, reading from verse 1 through to verse 8. Now I watched when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another. And he was given a great sword. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures, saying, "A quarter of wheat for a denarius, and 3/4 of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." When he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death. And Hades followed him, and they were given authority over a 4th part of the earth to kill with sword, and with famine, and with pestilence, and by wild beasts of the earth. Thank you, Brother Caleb. Look forward to your address. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Jonna. And thanks, everyone, for coming out tonight. Now, I didn't bring any little bits of paper, but hopefully everyone has kept their little scroll, because we're going to be dealing with, over the next 2 nights, the unfolding of the scroll up until the end of the great earthquake. So we're going to deal with seals 1 to 4 tonight, the 5th and the 6th seals next, and then whoever's doing Revelation 8 will be handling the 7th seal. So hopefully what we say is complementary to that. Now, I've just hit like 120 beats per minute, so this is not my favourite subject. My watch has just beeped at me and said, "Take it easy." So thank you for whoever put me down for this. It was my very great joy to be given Revelation, something that I don't know much about at all. But we're going to be speaking about the first 4 seals together this evening. Right? Yeah, which button does things? I have to do this. My laptop is doing absolutely nothing. This is a great sign. The seals, great. That's my children getting ready in the morning to come to the meeting. Right, okay, so how are we going to deal with this? What is going to be our structure? So we're going to, in this first class, we're going to look at, we've got a bit of an overview slide that we're going to keep coming back to as we go through each of the seals to try and ground us in the historical context of where we are. So we're going to have a look at that. We're going to have a look at a little bit of the framework that's going to pull this first session together. And then in our second session together, we're going to have a look at the fifth and the sixth seal, and we're going to have a look at two other little pieces. We're going to have a look at what the false lamb is, and we're going to have a look at the big picture at the end and try and tie it all together. So if we can do that, hopefully we've learnt something about it. Now this little section is covered in our reading tonight in Revelation 1, or Revelation 6 verses 1 to 8. So not a huge section of the Bible, and you could probably argue that there's not a load of actual detail other than saying that there's some horses and saying that there's some riders. So we're going to try and work out what this is. But this is part of the continuous unfolding, effectively, of these stages of Revelation that we've looked at over the last couple of classes. Okay, so I said about the framework. What are we talking about? This is basically the layout of what we're going to be talking about up into the great earthquake. We're not going to deal with the seventh seal in our considerations together, but tonight we're going to be looking at the red horse, the white horse, the black horse, the pale horse, and then in our second series of sections we're going to look at the souls under the altar and the great earthquake and that false lamb. Now each of these seals are going to represent a time period, and we're going to keep coming back to that time period as well. And the time periods, different commentators move these time periods around ever so slightly, but broadly there's some agreement about when they are, and they're all sort of post AD 96, which is sort of a grounding date, and then AD 324, which is another grounding date as well, when we've got sort of Constantine coming into the picture as well. So there's sort of two grounding dates, and then there's some broad activities that happen in there as well. And we're going to look at this progression of the pagan Roman system being judged. We're going to see there was a period of peace, a period of violence, a period of collapse, and then quite a big period of death as well. So it's actually not a particularly pleasant time to be a person in the Roman Empire at this particular point in history. So, first verse is, we get the Lamb opening one of the seals. There's this sound of thunder, and one of the four beasts saying, "Come and see." Right? We've got the Lamb opening that up, and what he sees is this rider sitting on a white horse with a bow and a crown, and he goes forth conquering and to conquer. And this terminology of come and see, come and see, come and see, that actually happens quite a bit. Each of these seals, in the first four seals, is called out as something to come and see. Now you might see that at the end of, if you open your Bible and have a look in Revelation chapter 6, you could probably, if you haven't already got it highlighted, you could probably highlight come and see in the end of verse 1. There's another one at the end of verse 3 for the second seal. There's another one at the end of in the middle of verse 5 for the third seal, and there's another one at the end of verse 7 for the next seal. So they're important sort of references to keep us grounded into what Jesus is trying to tell us, to make sure that we're understanding what he's saying here. Now, we're going to be getting right into no, we're not. We're not going to be talking about a lot of Greek words tonight, but there is this this idea of the come and see is not sort of just glance at something. Don't just come and look at it. It's about look with perception. Try and work out what's going on. And that's the name of the game for these seals. Jesus is trying to tell us to try and work out what's going on. He's not giving us the whole picture in what he's saying. He's saying, try and work out what's going on here. Go and actually have a look. Look with perception. Try and find out what's going on. And fortunately, a lot of people have done enormous amounts of work, and I'm hardly an expert in Revelation chapter 6. A lot of people have done a lot of work to try and work out what this looks like. And we're going to go through what that looks like tonight. The book by Greg Palmer was quite useful. Eureka is a reference of that you can go through as well. Volume 2, if you're getting really excited, that has a lot of information. And there's another couple of books as well, but they're probably the main two that I was using to go through here. Now, some of the pictures in here were actually chosen by Elliot, right? He was very instrumental in saying that one, that one, that one. So if you don't like some of the pictures, you have to talk to him, because he was saying, no, we must use it, and this was one of the first ones. Okay, so this white horse, what is the white horse about? We've got a white horse, and someone is sitting on this white horse with a bow. He's wearing a crown, and he goes forth conquering and to conquer. So there's a fair bit of information in that sort of thing. But it says that there was a noise like a thunder, a voice of thunder. Now, what could this thundering be? Now, one of the things that many people say is that the thunder is the start of this seal period. It's in AD 96. Now, there's going to be a lot of Roman emperors that we talk about tonight. There's a particular Roman emperor called Domitian, right? And a lot of the commentary argues that this thundering is this change that came about when Domitian dies. And he is portrayed through a lot of literature and a lot of primary source material as a Christian persecutor. He's someone who persecuted Christians. He thought they were atheists, right? The Christians were atheists. They didn't believe in the Roman God, so he didn't like that. He didn't like the fact that people were adopting Jewish customs. He didn't like that at all. And eventually, Domitian is assassinated by Stephen, actually one of his servants, or he's a servant associated with him at least. And the event is sort of seen as sort of divine retribution. This is God getting Domitian back. Okay, so this is sort of represented. People have thought about it this way for quite some time now. And so that takes us into this sort of first period, this white horse period. It's kicked off by the death of this Roman Emperor Domitian. And this starts off in AD 96 and runs through to about AD 183. And it's quite an interesting period of time because it's categorised by a period of relative peace in the empire. Peace for everyone, in fact. Like, it was a fairly peaceful time. Obviously not if you were an enemy of Rome, but peace generically. Now, there's a couple of symbols that get used in this, in the seals. And one of the ones that gets used over and over again is this symbol of a horse, right? And a horse was quite an important symbol to Rome. And obviously, when we think of Rome, sometimes we think about legionaries and we think about gladiators, we think about all these things, and we actually refer to a very important textbook through this thing. And you just have to notice when that text, I have a few pictures from that textbook. You'll have to let me know when they come up. But the reality is that although the Roman legionaries were definitely the core, the backbone of the army, the cavalry units were super important in the army, right? They were the shock troops, we say. The legionaries would hold them up and they would sort of engage them, and the cavalry would often come around the outside in flanking manoeuvres. And if you're looking at pictures of emperors and things like that, they're often on horseback. They're commanding from horseback. There was this whole class of people in the Roman Empire called the equestrians, right? They were the important people. They were actually wealthy enough, effectively, to have their own war horses. So if you were wealthy enough to own your own war horse, you didn't really want to walking around on the ground like everyone else. You wanted to be on your horse, right? And you wanted to have a big horse and you wanted to be very powerful. So big, powerful horses were the name of the game. And the Roman Empire needed horses for communication. So they would have a postal system that was pretty efficient, and it's a real symbol of the Roman Empire spreading its message, spreading the commands of the emperor through the empire. And it helped them get things into sync quite quickly. If the emperor gave a command, you could expect it to be in the most outer parts of the empire in weeks, not months, years, whatever. And that was probably formerly the case, that messages would take some time. Right? We can also see throughout the Bible, and this is a point made in Eureka as well, that the horse gets used as a symbol of people or nation, right? A collective body of people. Now, there's 5 horses, but it's a symbol that the Bible uses. Now, in Zechariah, it gets used as Yahweh visitors his flock. He has made them his goodly horse in battle. Right? So God's saying, people are like a flock. A herd is a better word. Maybe if you translate it in the Greek, it means, or the Hebrew, it means herd. But it's like a group of horses in a battle. Judah and Israel, Judah gets called the war horse of God later on. So people can be represented by horses as well. And this is actually a common thing in the Bible. And it's a common thing in prophecy as well, because lots of different nations have some sort of symbolic thing that represents them. So we're talking about Rome. It gets represented alternately by a dragon, an eagle, and a horse. Now we can sort of recognise a Roman eagle, like that was a thing. There was also a French Napoleonic eagle as well, so they took that symbology on as well as being frogs. But Persia and Macedonia, they have different symbols as well. Some are in Revelation, some are in Daniel, but this symbology of people being referred to as an animal, as a symbol, happens through the Bible. So prophecy often uses a nation's symbols as a symbol of that nation, for the nation themselves. There's also something else, right? There's this bow. Now, we don't often think about Roman cavalry archers or the cavalry in Rome often having bows, but it was a thing. They did have it, and it was quite a big thing because it represented some sort of ranged attack. You could run around, you could get fast, you could attack, and you could get out of there pretty quick. So it was quite thing. Now, Brother Luke did mention that the Bible doesn't say arrows; it just says a bow, and that's true. But in Eureka, it actually talks about arrows with words as arrows as a metaphor. So in Psalm 64, it talks about words being shot like arrows. Okay, so we've got this symbol of a bow, being the word of God used throughout the Bible, and God often uses his people and his plan as an instrument of his power as well. So we've got these couple of symbols grouped together. This is actually the first of the, there is quite a good textbook called Asterix, and I found this quite interesting. There's actually quite a few things in there. I was thinking to myself, why are these horses different colours? Like, what's the point of different coloured horses? And the Romans and the Greeks both use colour to represent different things, right? Now, there's a very famous thing in Asterix where there's chariot races, and the charioteers were in these four grouped colours. Now, they had red, they had white, they had green, and they had blues. Now, I could imagine the black horse in a very dark, misty, visionary environment being really dark blue, but it does say black. But these sort of symbols meant something to the people at the time. They weren't just random colours that were just talked about, that nobody knew what they meant. When they said white horse, nobody said, oh, well, what does a white horse mean? What does white mean? They didn't know. They weren't confused about that. So we end up with this generic picture of these four horsemen. The white horse with a bow, the red horse with a particular type of sword that we're going to talk about, the black horse with a set of scales, and the pale horse, like this light green, sort of yucky, sickly looking pale horse there. What we're going to see is that the white horse has this connotation of victory, and this was commonly used in the Roman world as well, and Greek literature. White was used for victory, red was often used for war, black was used for mourning, and pale sort of greeny colour was used for death. That was or medical things. That was quite common. We've got this horse as a symbol of the Roman people, of the empire. We've got the rider on top of the horse each time as someone who's directing the events that are happening with that horse. And we're not saying that the rider is an empire, but otherwise an agent, some sort of spiritual agent guiding that horse around. And ultimately, they're crowned with victory as their work is complete. Okay, so this white horse, this time period, where are we talking about? We're talking about a group of emperors that existed within this first seal period, and there was 5 of them. There was Nerva. He was this stabilising influence. He came to power after Domitian was assassinated, and he helped restore trust between the Senate and the emperor, because there was a breakdown in trust. And he began to, adopt capable successors himself, and he didn't have that long a reign, but it was a pretty stabilising reign. Trajan, who we're going to look at in a second, he was this administrator, but he also went forth and conquered. He was a conquering administrator, and he expands the empire to almost as big as it ever got. And he had lots of successful military campaigns, and he did a lot of infrastructure building. Right? He built a lot of projects, he built a lot of public works, and he was pretty respected for how he approached justice and administration. Right? So he was a well-respected emperor, and he did a lot of good for the people and expanded the empire as well. Hadrian, and we might know of Hadrian's Wall, he was a guy who sort of consolidated the empire. He built on the work that Trajan had done. He strengthened a lot of the frontier things around the empire, Hadrian's Wall being one of them. He reorganised the administration to be a bit stronger, and he really actually tried to promote some of the cross-cultural integration between different tribes and on the borders of the empire. He tried to stabilise all that and have a bit better harmony between the people that they were ruling over. Antonius was pretty peaceful, and this is one of the most peaceful periods in Roman history. Very little conflict. He was all about good government, this guy, and he made sure that the empire remained stable and prosperous. And then we get down to Marcus Aurelius. He was like this philosopher king, right? He had a lot of writings, he had a lot of diaries that he kept, and he was a very stoic guy. He followed the stoic principles of Greek philosophy, and he had a lot of external wars, and he was presiding over a lot of sort of sickness. There were some plagues that came through under his leadership, and he was considered one of Rome's most thoughtful leaders. Okay, so this is a period of great stability. There was largely capable rulers. They knew what they were doing. They were stabilising, and they were good administrators, and this is a bit of a golden age of Rome. Now, a golden age for them also meant that the Christians generically were able to expand in that period of time as well. And it was often because of the work of men like this. So Trajan, Emperor Trajan, this is a relatively famous thing. We talk about it from time to time. Most recently, Brother Darren DePorus at Bible School spoke about this as one of the primary sources that we use to anchor our faith when we're not using the Bible. This is one of the types of sources that we use. He's writing off to a guy called Pliny, and Pliny the Elder. He was an elder statesman. He was someone who was wise, and Trajan was seeking his advice. And he was basically saying to Trajan, he was saying, right, I've got these Christians. They've been brought before me. What do I do? What do I do with them? What should I do? And he first asked if they were Christians. He threatened them. Roman citizens were sent to trial. But what Trajan actually says is he says, look, just take it easy. Don't actively hunt them. Don't punish people before they're accused and proven guilty. If they repent from being Christians and are more willing to be Romans again, treat them mercifully, and no anonymous accusations. They're some of the things that Pliny advised him to do. Now, that doesn't necessarily solve any problems for Christians, but this is one of those primary source materials. And there was no sort of systematic persecution of Christians necessarily in this time, like there is in later times as well. There's pressure, there's definitely pressure to them, but it's sort of quietly spreading. It's allowed to quietly spread. There's not coordinated destruction. Okay, so this is a period of relative calm. We come into the period of the red horse, right? And the red horse is the second of the seals, and is red. That's a sort of a colour that we're going to speak about. And power is given to him that sits on him. So the person sitting on the horse is given power to take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. All right, so this is sounding much more ominous, and it is much more ominous. We've just had this period of sort of 5 good emperors, right? Now we're into something that is much worse. There's a lot of civil unrest, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of murder of emperors, there's a lot of political instability, there's a lot of bloodshed. The actual word for fire, for fire there is or the word red is fire. And it's got the idea of, if you were to cut yourself and the blood's a bit dark, it's not got a lot of oxygen, it's quite dark. But if you were to cut yourself in an arterial vein and the blood gushes out and it's quite bright red, if you ever had that really bright red looking like, ooh, this is not good. I shouldn't have done that, right? That's what we're sort of talking about here. We've got this bright red flowing, this arterial blood gushing out. It's not just a drip of blood, it's gushing out. And this is sort of the start of a period of collapse in the Roman Empire. So, where are we up to? We're in the red horse, civil unrest and violence, about 183 to 221. Still in the Roman Empire, but we're in this period of violence now. We're not in a period of calm anymore. We're into a period of violence. Right, couple of emperors in this period as well. There's Commodus, Britannicus, Didius, Septimus, and Geta. Right? These are the emperors that are in this period of time, and you can see the period of time is not all that long. It's relatively short and sharp. And we've got this red horse. Now this is the original red horse that became the other three red horses. And the sword is wrong. So we're going to talk about the sword as well. But we come, so after the first seal, Marcus Aurelius was the last of the emperors in this stable period, right? And he dies. And Commodus comes along. He's the son of Marcus Aurelius. And he grows up, he's erratic, he is self-indulgent, he alienates the Senate, he alienates the army, and eventually he's assassinated, right? And this period of stability sort of comes crumbling down with the assassination of Commodus. They hadn't had someone assassinated for a long time, and it now comes crumbling down. And there's an example of the type of unrest there is in the kingdom, or in the Roman Empire at the time. There's this riot at a circus. Now, a lot of the Romans, the grain supply is always a problem in the ancient world, right? Food supply is always a problem. And they blame this grain supply problem on Commodus's favourite sort of minister, the minister of grain supply, or whatever he was. Right? And there's this uprising in the circus, and they sort of abandon the games. They sort of abandon them, and the people go on a bit of a rampage through towards the imperial palace. And they're going to grab this official, and that's going to be the end of him. And we start to see the interjection of this group of people, the Praetorians, and we're going to talk about them a little bit as well. The emperor, Commodus at the time, sends out the Praetorians. They disperse the mob, and this is where the symbology comes from, this arterial blood. They don't just disperse the mob, they absolutely trample them to death. These horses just ride over them, these big war horses, these destriers, as they're called in the Middle Ages, right? These aren't little prancing ponies. These are the big, angry, biting, stomping horses that they used to train for war. I've never seen one of these, but apparently they're absolutely terrifying. The horses would bite you. They would be given massive metal shoes to stomp on people, and they'd be trained to do it. They didn't just prance around, oh no, there's a person there. These were angry horses, very angry. These trample over, and it basically comes this close to a full civil war in Rome. Eventually, Commodus sort of tries to calm the crowd and goes and gets his favourite minister, chops off his head, displays the head to the people and say, there you go, you got what you want, and that satisfies the mob, and the violence ends. But this is a foretaste, there's a bit of a taste of the sort of bloodshed that's to come, right? This is not entering into a good period of time. Now, about swords, this is probably for Jack more than anyone, right? Because Jack will give me this big lecture and go, oh, you wrong sword, they had this, blah, 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 he'll make a sword and show me and it won't be right. Right, there's a couple of swords that we're talking about. This is the Marcharia, right? It's like a cavalry sword, and it's small and it's curved, and this is the word that's used for the sword in the great sword, but it's not actually a great sword. You'd expect a great sword to be this enormous sword that people are going to start chopping with. It's not. The text says great sword more to emphasise the intensity of the violence, the scale of the amount of bloodshed that was happening, and the internal killing that's happened. Right? It's not because it was a big sword, it's because it was used in a lot of things. There was all sorts of things. In this period, there's emperors assassinated, there's military revolts, there's civil wars, there's purges of the political class, there's blood going everywhere. Right? That is the word used, the Marcharia. Now that is different to the gladius, Jack. So different to the gladius, not the same thing. The Marcharia is all about execution, slaughter, cutting. The gladius is all about stabbing, right? So it's a different thing. When you got your gladius out, it's because you're in a row with troops. You're not in a cavalry charge, right? There's no horses involved when you've got a gladius. You've got something else. You've got two different types of swords. There's this sword, and there's a sword in the fourth seal. Okay, it's a cutting sword and a stabbing sword. Gladius, it doesn't even come around to the 3rd century, so don't try and tell me that it doesn't. This one gets used in the 4th seal. The Marcharia in the 2nd seal, however you say it, and the Rhomphaea in the 4th seal. The Rhomphaea is a big, double-handed, heavy, hacking sword. Right? This is different from the gladius as well. And we don't often think of Roman soldiers running around with these different types of swords. We think about the Asterix style of, getting biffed and swords going flying. But there's these different swords. This Rhomphaia, right, this is the big thing. This is an absolute hacking weapon. Think of like a long wood-splitting axe that's in the shape of a sword. This is for absolute power, two-handed power. That's what's coming later in the fourth sword. That's when things really start to get... This is the Macharia, that's like human judgment. That's people running around killing each other, right? This big one, this is divine justice. That's it coming down. Right, we have this period of time called the period of the 5 emperors, right? It's absolutely chaotic, and it's in this second seal period, and later on in the fourth seal there's actually a period of 6 emperors as well, but there's a lot of killing of emperors in AD 193, and a lot of it is down to these guys, right? And this is absolutely for sure a picture of the Praetorian Guard, because shorthistory.com said that it was. All right, but there's these couple of things that happen. The Praetorian Guard eventually murder Pertinax, this Roman emperor. And what they do is they auction the empire off to whoever's got enough money to want to become the emperor. Now, when you start to hear some of these stories, think about it in modern terms. Like, do we ever have, political figures with the most money rising to power? Well, that's exactly what's happening here. The provincial armies don't actually want the person who became the emperor. They go, no, we don't want that. And then you get this period where 3 other generals get proclaimed emperor. So it's chaotic, right? The people are being proclaimed emperor everywhere, and there's civil war. There's this civil war that's breaking out, and it's chaotic. People are dying left, right, and centre. Now, these Praetorian Guards, they've been around for some time. They weren't a particularly big force at the time. They're only about 4,500 men. They eventually rise to about 15,000 men much later on, but they're the elite troops that are sort of the close protection detail for the emperor. They protect his headquarters. They'd been around since the time of Augustus. Interestingly, they start off living in a tent near the emperor. They end up living in this quite big castle on the outskirts of Rome, and they use like as a secret police. Now, we know that when dictators come to power, they often run around with some military authority under their personal control. We can see it right now in America, right? There's ICE agents running around doing things that are directed almost not from the government. The Gestapo did it, the Kempi did it, it happens all the time. And the leader of this Praetorian Guard is called the Praetorian Prefect, and he's a very, very important person. And the Praetorians themselves are very, very important because they get basically 3 times the pay of all the other Roman soldiers, so they're pretty well paid. They only have to serve 16 years, not 20 years, and so they've got and they've got the best armour, the best weapons. They're looked after by the emperor. It's a pretty good job. Now, what they also get every time, another picture of one of these guys, right? They also get this little thing at the start of a new emperor's reign called a donativum, right? A donation. And it was equal to a couple of years' pay, up to 7 years' pay for these guys. So basically, it was buying the loyalty of the Praetorian Guard each time there was a new emperor. So you can imagine the changing of emperors was a very lucrative business for the Praetorians because the new emperor had to pay up 7 times the way their yearly salary every time there was a new changing of the guard. And this happened pretty much all the way until Constantine, at the Battle of Milvian Bridge, defeats that faction that has the Praetorians in it and disbands the Praetorian Guard permanently. So these guys are cashing in on new emperors. And we're going to see that during some of these seal periods, there's a lot of new emperors and they're getting a lot of money. And it ends up draining a lot of the finances because the money isn't coming out of the pocket of the emperor, right? He's not opening his personal wallet and handing them some money. He's taking it from the people, effectively. Okay, so in this year of the 5 emperors, we spoke about that there's these 5 guys that go through. Commodus, obviously, he was killed in AD 192. Pertinax, he tried to reform things. He was a pretty good general. People respected him as administrator. He tried to control the Praetorian Guard. They didn't like that. Goodbye. 87 days later, he's dead. Julianus, right? He was the guy who purchased the throne. He paid the money. They said this much. He said, okay, here's the money. He paid a lot of money, in fact. And everyone else said, no, we're not having this guy. He gets executed after 2 months, so he's gone. Niger. Right, he's a bit of a challenger from the outside. You know, the Eastern legions, the guys out in the east, they're on the borderlands fighting the Persians and all that sort of stuff. They want this guy. He's the guy for them. There's a bit of a civil war. He dies. And Severus, he comes along. He is a military hard man, right? He's one of the, in the civil war, he's one of the top generals. He gets to the top by being actually competent as a general. He defeats all the people. He strengthens the military. He lets the military into politics a bit more, right? The military always like that when they're in the thick of things. He increases the soldiers' pay, which increases their power, and he founds this dynasty really that, you know, is all about military dominance, right? And imperial rule. So it's really imperial. The military are across all aspects of government. So that's sort of the end of that period. And now we get into the third period. That was a very violent period. We get into this third period of the oppression. Now you imagine if the government has just kicked out all the police who are there to help you, in inverted commas, they're there to help, and they've installed the military as the help. They don't care so much. They're getting paid a lot of money, and most of it is to, you know, taken from the people. So we're getting into a period of really severe oppression, like military oppression. It's not a good time. Right, this Black Horse period, there's a lot of economic hardship, there's a lot of political pressure, lots of suffering around the place, a lot of social distress. Right, this is a bad time, a very dark time in the empire, symbolised by the Black Horse. Right, so this Black Horse comes out. The man, the person sitting on the Black Horse has a pair of balances in his hand. Right, a set of scales. He's riding along with a set of scales. And what's said is a measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny, don't hurt the oil and the wine. Okay? So this economic distress, we're starting to talk about food being pretty hard to get hold of and a lot of financial pressures. Now, if you're paying the army, or the military guys, a lot of money, where do you get the money from? Well, you have to tax people a lot. So they increase the taxation. The strain on the average person and the taxes they have to pay start to get more and more and more. There's a lot of mismanagement of money, right? There's a lot of paying of bribes. There's a lot of construction projects that just waste money hand over foot. There's a lot of social hardship. Again, things that are common to our time now. Some of these things here, these aren't particularly that are strange to us. We've sort of seen this. We've actually seen a period of relatively peace. We're starting to see a period of, you know, there's a lot of war and violence, and we're also starting to see this sort of idea of a lot of hardship, more taxes, a lot of strain, a lot of financial mismanagement. It's all common to our era now as well. So we're into this Black Horse period, AD 212 to 235, marked by famine and distress, right? Economic collapse, effectively. A bad time for everyone. Now, we spoke about the colours before and how the Greeks viewed colours, and black gets, it's commonly associated with mourning, with scarcity, all through the thing. In the book of Job, it talks about, my skin is black upon me, right? He's got this black skin. His harp is turned to mourning. So this colour black is symbolised throughout the Bible as a symbol of hardship, effectively. And a lot of the hardship is, you know, not traced back, but this guy seems to feature in some of the start of it, at least. Now, this guy in AD 212 thinks to himself, well, I need to get money from somewhere. Where do I get money from? I know what I can do. I can say, everyone's a citizen, right? The British have just tried this by just saying, if your parents are born in England, well, so are you, right? Everyone's a citizen. Let's expand the tax base. We've got 1 million people. Let's say everyone's a citizen. Now we've got 4 million people. Beautiful. Now, it's the idea of all these sorts of things that it's unifying, right? Oh, it just gets everyone, you know, we're not going to have barbarians anymore. They're going to be citizens too. We're not going to have people on the frontier. They're going to be citizens. It seems like it's pretty unifying, but the reality is that taxes that didn't apply to those people ever before suddenly come into play for the people that have absolutely no concept of why they would be paying those taxes in the first place, right? Things like inheritance tax, manumission tax, you know, by expanding it, he increased the tax base, but it brought a lot of social pressure and fiscal burden onto normal people. So he's increasing the military pay because he's got to keep them on side. He's got to keep bumping up the pay for the soldiers to keep them on side. but that means he needs more money. So he's got to tax people more. What better way than to have more people? It just means the army becomes more and more critical for survival. Now, if you're taxing people heavily, well, you've only got so much metal to make into money at the end of the day. We're not printing plastic notes up at Banknote Australia, right? You've got to have real coins. You've got to mint these things. You've got to get them out to the people. So he thinks, what can I do? How can I make more money? I need to print more money, but I don't have a printer. Printing has not been invented yet, but I need to print more. What he thinks up is he's going to say, well, I'll just put slightly less silver in the coin, and that'll make the silver go a bit further. People want to see the shiny coin. I'll just put a bit less in it. And that's what he does. He starts to devalue the currency, effectively. So before, when you picked up a silver coin, you'd say, this coin is basically all silver. I can trust that the value of this coin is silver. And you would go and pay for something, and the person getting it would say, this coin is silver, this has this much value. And the value would fluctuate from time to time. But when you start saying, I'm going to put only 75% silver in this coin, people say, well, it's nice that you've got that silver coin, but I'm going to give you this much grain for it now. It's not worth as much as it was before. So there's this inflationary pressure where you need more money to buy the things that used to be down here. And the price had been fairly stable for many, many years about what things were. And that's why the thing talks about the price of food, like the price of grain and the price of barley, because people start to weigh things, right? You get your coin, you put it on the scales. You say, how much does it weigh? No, that's one of the new coins. You're not getting so much barley anymore. You put the old coin on and it balances. Okay, that's the old coin. We can pay for things with that. So this brings a lot of strain to people. Their money suddenly is not worth as much. And in the meantime, they're getting more soldiers who need more coins because they know the coins can't buy them as much anymore. And you can see, probably a bit hard to see, but you can see the general trend of this is basically how much silver is in the coins, a Roman coin, right? So at the start of the Roman Empire, basically the coins are basically pure silver, near enough, pure silver, a bit of stabilising metals in there. By the time you get down to the 3rd century, you're well under 50% of silver in that coin. So inflation is out of control because your money is just not worth anything anymore. It's not worth anything at all. So the empire starts to get really financially overextended. And you can imagine what happens when people's money is not worth much anymore. Things become harder to buy. It's happening to all of us today, right? What we could have filled up with $1.60 diesel 2 weeks ago, tomorrow it'll be $2.85, no doubt, right? Our money is not worth as much anymore, and it becomes a big social pressure because people can't do what they used to be able to do with the resources that they had. In addition to that, prior to this event, prior to all this social pressure, right, the world had been about 75 million people, give or take, historians say. There'd been about 75 million people. Leading up to this, there'd been quite a big plague. And this plague had wiped out many inhabitants. So you've got prices rising. You've got people effectively rising as well. We're going to have a look at that next. The population had grown quite a bit. This guy had gone, everyone's a citizen. Let's get more tax base. Prices are here. People are here. There's a big plague. People start to fall pretty rapidly. But the prices don't fall. The prices stay high. The population is declining. But the weather starts to conspire a little bit as well. In the golden age of Rome, as at the lead up to this, when silver was worth a lot of money, your coins were basically 100% silver, we're in this climatic cycle called the Roman warm period, right? And what that means is, who cares what the weather's doing? Well, it matters a lot back then. It matters a big deal back then, more than we could probably think about now, because as good as the weather was as much food as you could grow, right? And this helped the Roman Empire actually expand because it was warm. So the grain would grow, and this was a grain-based economy, right? We're pretty much just talking about grain here. The grain could grow. People are farming areas of land that were previously not really farmable. They talk about growing grain in Italy up to 800 metres of elevation, right? So that's starting to get relatively cold up there. It was warm enough there. That red line is basically modern temperature averages. So we've actually got periods of the Roman warm period that are, warm like today. Agricultural productivity was like it is today, which is actually relatively productive at the moment. It's warmer conditions, People are growing stuff where they previously wouldn't have grown things before. In Northern Europe, they're able to get grain from lots of different places. Population's expanding because you can feed them. And now we come to this point around 200 AD, and look what the temperature's doing. It's starting to plunge. People who are out in the corners of the empire, who could previously grow their own food, can't anymore. It starts to shrink in, right? The empire starts shrinking. People who could previously provide for themselves rely on the Roman Empire, but the prices are absolutely skyrocketing. There's regional droughts. There's pressure on all sorts of agricultural endeavours, but it hasn't quite collapsed just yet. It's just getting slightly cooler, but it makes a big difference. Because as the reality is, bread was about 80% of the people's intake of calories. Right? So if you can't get as much bread and it's most of your calories, guess what happens? You start to get pretty hungry. And along comes this man here, right? This is when it starts to get really bad. Really, really bad. This is people absolutely dying in their droves. The fourth seal, the pale horse. Widespread death, instability, imperial collapse, effectively. The pale horse, his name that sat on him was death. Hell followed with him, right? This is not nice imagery, right? Power was given him unto the fourth part of the earth to kill with the sword, with hunger, with death, with the beasts of the earth, right? Why is it happening? Because the food supply is collapsing, the stability of the empire is collapsing, inflation is out of control, military power is out of control. People are really, really, really starting to suffer. And this is the crisis, it's the start of the crisis of the 3rd century. So we're up to here now. We're getting to the point where emperors start to rotate like there's no tomorrow, okay? The emperor is seen as the cause of all the problems. It really starts to rotate, and a lot of them die. And we're going to see how many die. Now we come to the crisis of the 3rd century, right? It's an imperial crisis where the Roman Empire had expanded to a point where it can't sustain itself anymore. The weather had deteriorated, conditions had deteriorated to such that it starts to shrink, and the Roman Empire itself begins to disintegrate. It starts to fall apart. And there's basically a reasonably quick split into 3 broad geographic areas, and they have competing politics in each particular area because they care about different things. And once Diocletian comes along, well, this basically starts from Severus Alexander through to Diocletian. They're the emperors that it happens in the time frame of, and it starts to fall apart. And these 3 competing states start to become evident. Effectively, you've got this middle area, which is the central Roman control. In the west, up on the western side, you've got Gaul, Britain, a couple of parts of Spain. In the east, you've got Syria, Egypt, and most of the eastern provinces, right? So it starts to split up, and it starts to get pretty nasty indeed, right? Here's the emperors, and this is how fast they go. There's 26 of them, and they just go bang, 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 bang. They're gone, they're gone, they're gone. They don't last very long at all. And they're either claimants to the title, generals who think that they're going to be emperor, but it happens over and over again. The Roman the Senate, during this time, it dissolves into a bit of chaos. There's a lot of coups, there's short reigns, and it just becomes unstable and fragmented. But it gets worse. Because there's not much imperial control anymore, like the government isn't functioning very well anymore at all. Things aren't happening, the money's not worth anything, the frontiers themselves start to break down. The things that were formerly shielding the Roman Empire against the barbarians, they start to break down. So you've got pressure from inside and you've got pressure from outside. And you start to see invasions from other places throughout the empire. The Goths start to come here. Other people start to come down. It starts to get very bad. Now, the Huns haven't come along yet, so these people are actually invading because of Roman weakness. They're not being chased into the middle, okay? They're going in because of Roman weakness. The Huns themselves happen about a century later. All of these emperors that start to fall apart. This area is basically under constant civil war in these areas. There's always a civil war going, and there is 6 emperors in 238, all by itself. 238 is 6 emperors. That's the year of the 6 emperors. And the Rhine frontier, the Danube, Syria, Gaul, everywhere is in civil war. It's absolute chaos. And you can imagine what the people are suffering in a time like that. They're suffering a lot, right? They're suffering a lot. The foreign invasions, people who make it all the way down, deep into Roman territory. The Goths make it, the Alemanni make it, the Franks make it. The Persian Empire down in the east, they start to push really far up into the Roman Empire. It becomes super aggressive. There's foreign invasions happening and it's falling out. It gets to the point, right? It gets so low that a Roman emperor, Valerian, actually is captured by the Persians. Right? No Roman emperor had even become close to captured by a foreign power before. They capture Valerian, the Persians capture him alive. Right? This is a very, very low point. You've got troops being redeployed from the border areas, like around the outside, being redeployed back in to deal with civil wars. If you're redeploying troops, you're leaving the population to fend for themselves. They're meant to be farming. They're meant to be protected by the troops. The Goths come in, steal all the food out of things, and then suddenly there's no food. There was very little before, now there's really none. It's a really big problem. When you start to lose people, you start to lose tax revenue. When you start to lose tax revenue, people start to move, right? People start to move around, and the pressure on the system becomes too much, and it starts to absolutely collapse. But don't worry, another plague comes along, right? In all this, what do you think's happening when people are moving all around the empire? They're bringing their germs, they're bringing their sickness, they're all mingling together. The Cyprian plague comes along, and it absolutely devastates places like Alexandria. Now, where did Rome get most of its grain from if the weather's starting to cool? Warm places, right? Where was the sort of the last place that was reliably warm? Egypt. Where were they getting a lot of their grain from? Egypt. A plague comes along and wipes out 62% of Egypt. Where do they get their grain from now? Well, they don't. That's the problem. They start to get nothing. So they've got no food, effectively. They're absolutely in famine conditions. Farms are being abandoned because people are running away from famines. And we've got these awful plagues going through. This Cyprian, who's one of the people involved in this, you know, I won't read out the symptoms, but they're not nice. They're very bad. There's thousands of people dying daily in Rome, let alone in the provinces. And there's significant population decline in the cities. People start abandoning villages. If you think about the Black Death that happens in England, whole villages are wiped out at a time. Interestingly, this is actually a time for significant growth in Christianity. Christianity actually starts to rise as a popularity because the Christians themselves were able to provide, effectively, the first hospitals, some palliative care, basically, for dying people. They weren't fixing them, but they will provide food and water. And sometimes, someone who's so starved was often sick because they were starving. Giving them food and water often helped them recover enough that they walked away. And everyone saw these Christians providing food and water to people who were dying. Here's your food and water. Bing, the person gets up, like the nobleman's son, and he keeps walking. So the people think, these Christians are healing people, right? And so that leads to a great uptick in early Christianity. And it starts a lot of the charitable networks, effectively, that the early church in Rome is organised around. And it was really only the Christians at the time that were providing any of this care at all. The pagans, they were out of there, right? They were leaving. They were leaving the town in droves. Only the Christians were staying at the end of the day. So people obviously thought, this is some sort of divine favour on the Christians. We better be Christians too, because the only way we're going to be saved from this plague. Okay, so that's something that happened, and preaching to someone sick on the ground and telling them about Christ, and then giving them some food and water, and they sort of get up. They're pretty convinced that this is the right message, right? They were dying before, and now they're not. Okay, and they probably died later anyway. Right, the economic breakdown is significant. We spoke about this before. By the time we get to the 2070s, only 5% of the coinage is silver at all. It's nothing. This is not a precious coin anymore. It's absolutely worthless. It's not worth anything. And we know that they weren't silver because almost none of them have survived. You can see they've rusted away to almost nothing because there was nothing in there to stop them from breaking down. So the prices obviously keep rising because these coins are just worth nothing. Now, this is where we start to consult the real textbook, right? We see that you just have to keep shoveling more and more money to the army to help this. 80% of the imperial budget that should have been going towards feeding the people that had no food was going towards the army to keep the army running. 80% of the money. Incredibly large amounts of basically very little money that they have. It consumed all of the budget. The provinces, right, they are absolutely feeling the strain. That's the tax collector that goes out to the village, right, to get the taxes. He's going out there because the Romans have no money left, and their money is worthless. So people are starting to just abandon land, abandon places to get rid of this tax burden. And obviously start abandoning your villages, the fields that are around them, they suffer as well, and productivity goes down even further. The trade just falls apart, right? Trade itself just falls apart. Trading between different parts of the empire, they can't agree on money anymore. They just stop trading with each other. Long distance trade just falls to pieces. The road system starts to deteriorate. They can't pay the workers to fix it anymore. The empire becomes more regionalised and more localised. Agriculture, people fleeing plagues, people fleeing taxation, it starts to fall apart. There's labour shortages, people are dying of plagues. The climate is going topsy-turvy. They'd never seen this before. Grain used to grow here, now nothing grows. What's going on? People start to leave. And the breadbasket of the empire, Egypt, I mean, it lost half its people, right? They were all dead. It got to the point where they made some special rules. Like, Roman emperors weren't allowed to go to Egypt. It was that important to the empire. They were not allowed to go there without permission. There was a special imperial prefect who looked after Egypt. No emperors were allowed to walk there so that no one could seize the grain supply and starve Rome. Well, if people start dying and there's no grain anyway, well, it happens by de facto. It just happens. You start to get this urban contraction. People are living in the cities who are dying of plague are leaving as well. So they're leaving to places where there's no food, back in the farmland. So it's this weird thing. People are going everywhere. No one knows what's going on. It becomes extremely defensive. Everything in life is defensive. Everyone, the confidence in the Roman Empire is just falling apart. It's completely and utterly, the economic systems that were dependent on trust, this coin is worth this, is gone. It's finished. All the places start to mint their own coins, right? It becomes localised. We're not using an imperial coin anymore. We're making a coin for this village. We're making a coin for that village. There's so many different coins for all the different villages because the trust in the empire is completely gone. As an economic system, it's done. Right, so, too long fell asleep. Right, the first four seals, the white horse, the red horse, the black horse, and the pale horse. And this is us finishing, by the way. Right, white horse, relatively stable, good economic conditions, strong central rule, not a lot of persecution for Christians. Red horse, that piece is gone. He was given power to remove it. Right? There's civil war, assassinations, coups. They've got Romans killing Romans. The white horse, or the black horse, sorry, we've got the economic strain that has followed that bloodshed, the extreme economic hardship, the inflation, the fact that the currency went to almost no silver content, the extra tax that needed to be paid to make up for everything, the fact that grain was becoming hard to get because the climate was making it difficult. Rationing started to come in. We've got the scales and people weighing things. You couldn't just give them a coin and get the thing in the right amount of grain anymore. A measure of wheat for a denarius, it said, became very transactional. If you wanted to get grain, you had to give them this much silver. The fourth seal, the pale horse, right, the crisis just fully erupts. The emperors just turn over, 26 of them, bang, bang, they're gone. 6 in 1 year. There's civil war, there's foreign invasion, there's massive plagues, there's mass mortality. Death is riding openly, right, through the Roman Empire. There is people dying everywhere. There's lots of first-hand accounts of people from Rome leaving and going to the northern shores of Africa and just being massacred by the people out there that said, we don't want you. Right? They'd steal all their clothes and just kill them and throw them back into the Mediterranean Sea. It was an awful time and there was no escape from it. And the pressure that was on pagan Rome was absolutely intense. So, what do we cover tonight? We covered those first 4 periods. Terrible time in the world's history. A very, very terrible time in the world's history. And we're going to look at the next ones in the next class, effectively. So in class 2, we're going to look at the concept of the souls under the altar. We're going to look at the great earthquake, and this is like the the final judgments, effectively, the complete destruction of pagan Rome and the pagan authority. It becomes completely destroyed. So, that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that, Caleb, for that excellent summary of Revelation chapter 6, which is that first section of the decline of the pagan Roman Empire, and we look forward to the next section and completing that section in our class next Sunday. We're going to close now, brothers and sisters, with a hymn, and then our brother Phil is going to close with prayer and thanks for supper. And the hymn that we'll close with is a very familiar one, 415, which reads, "The day thou gavest, Lord, is ended. The darkness falls at thy behest. To thee our morning hymns ascended. Thy praise shall sanctify our rest."
Our great and glorious Heavenly Father, we come before you at this time to thank you for this time that we have had to learn more about the word that has been given to us and its meaning and all those things that have happened. Because there is so much that we need to learn, and may our knowledge of you and your plan and purpose be expounded in all our minds. And we ask that we also thank you for the food and refreshment we're about to partake of. May it help and strengthen us to do what is right in your sight. And as we depart this place, we ask that your hand will be with us and that we are dismissed with your blessing, and our hearts be filled with joy and with peace until that time when your Son returns to this earth. And we ask all these things and approach you at this time through the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Very sweaty. What's that? It's hot.
It's amazing how it fits.
Did you draw some horses? Oh, you did. The red horse. Wow. Yeah, it's all about to repeat itself again, right? Like it's the same thing.